One night I was down in Tribeca, and I stumbled across this paper waste on the sidewalk. Who cares, right? Except I looked and I realized the label showed whose paper recycling garbage it was. Harvey Weinstein.
Welcome to another episode of Covert to Overt. I'm your host, Mark Chauppetta. I guess I call myself kind of the resident private investigator who should be, you know, more secretive than I really am. But I want to introduce my guest, Tony Ortega. We go back to 2011. That's when you first wrote about me in the now defunct, right? Village Voice. You were the editor in chief. I had just come off an appearance on the Howard Stern show, and I don't think you were negative towards me. I think you were, quite
I thought it was great that you were speaking out. I mean, here you were. I deal with Scientology's dirty tricks all the time.
right.
And, they always have private investigators working for them. And you had worked for Scientology, and then you were talking about it. And I thought that was great, and I enjoyed speaking with you right away.
Right, right. Well, no, I appreciate that. And so I had written a book called "Happens All the Time: Cheating in the Good Old USA." And it was mostly about infidelity work that I have done as a private investigator, but there was a little bit in there about my dealings with, I guess, cults. And at the time, I was no longer working for the Church of Scientology. So I mentioned it. I brought up certain things. I ran it past my legal team. I'm surrounded by lawyers. And as long as I wasn't really naming names or places, and I was kind of keeping things somewhat loose, uh, it was okay to write about it. And of course, at the time, my publicist was pitching me to go on Stern, and Kevin McCurry, shout out. And that's the one thing that he seemed to be the most intrigued about, Howard, was asking me about Scientology. And I was quite upfront. I'm like, look, I'll tell you things, but I can't tell you certain things.
Right.
So you know, it was an interesting time in my life because I didn't know what the heck Scientology was. I was a rookie investigator in the early 1990s, and I bumped into what would you call it? One of their field agents. There's a certain name for it, right?
I don't know who was running you, but usually it's the Office of Special Affairs that runs the private investigators, or they have cutouts. They will hire an attorney who hires a private investigator. So, but we've talked about that over the years. I mean, you've
Yeah,
been very helpful to me as far as confirming some things about how Scientology operates, and so that's why I've always enjoyed talking to you.
yeah, yeah. And again, it also seems like, and you tell me, are they more transparent now because I have no choice? No,
No, no, no.
no.
No, you see, this is one of the things that's so fun about Scientology, really, is that it was created by L. Ron Hubbard, this 20th century science fiction writer, who literally spelled out everything, every policy, every way of doing dirty tricks, investigating people, harming people. He wrote it all down. The guy loved to write things down, and they have to follow those playbooks to the letter.
Mhm.
And then he died. He died in 1986, and they consider everything he wrote to be sacrosanct.
Right, it's gospel.
And so, you look at what they were doing to people in the 60s, you look at what they're doing to people in the 70s, and you realize that's exactly what they're doing today. Now, they've changed a few things, a few methods, but generally, they do the same things over and over again because they just feel like they have to operate from Hubbard's playbook.
Interesting. Well, every playbook needs to change. So, so I know prior to, well, right now you're the editor in chief of the Underground Bunker, which we will put up on this website. Great, informative um, blog. Is that what you would
Well,
call it?
yeah, I moved to Substack a few years ago, and I really love it. I'm doing great on Substack, and I have a real loyal readership moved over from the Village Voice, has followed me around, and I have now been writing daily about the Church of Scientology for 15 years, and overall for 30. My first story about Scientology was more than 30 years ago.
So your first story was when you were out in Los Angeles
I was in
working.
Phoenix, actually.
Phoenix.
I'm from LA, but
Okay.
I had moved to Phoenix, and it started with this newspaper there called New Times.
What was your obsession with? I don't know if obsession is the right choice of words, but what piqued your interest about
You
Scientology?
know, yeah, Mark, I'm from LA, so I always kind of had an awareness of
Mhm.
it growing up, and I found myself in Phoenix, and I was getting a new job, working for this newspaper, and I was just looking for great stories. I mean, one of the nice things about a weekly like that is you try to find stories that either the daily newspaper missed or did badly.
Mhm.
And so one day I was just leafing through the Arizona Republic
Mhm.
and looking through the letters to the editor, and here was this letter from a guy named Rick Ross, and he said, he had been sued. He was a cult deprogrammer, and he'd been sued over a case and had lost a $5 million judgment. And he wrote in the letter, said, okay, you reported on my case and that I lost $5 million. You didn't bother to point out that the plaintiff was recruited by the Church of Scientology to sue me. And I thought, hey, that sounds juicy, right?
Right.
And that's what I'm looking for, is a story that the Daily it was too complicated for them to handle, right?
Right.
So I contacted this Rick Ross guy, and I did the first full profile of him. He's very well known now. In fact, he's got a book coming out. I think it's going to do really well. But this was 30 years ago, and
Right.
it was my first cover story for that paper. It got me my first permanent reporter job there. And so over the years, I would just come back once in a while to Scientology because I had generated some real good sources there. And I wrote about a lot of different things, Mark, but every time I'd come back to Scientology, the audience was there. People thirst for stories out of that place.
And they're almost like the gift that keeps on giving.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like they can't help themselves, and they're just continuously giving you content to be able to write about. Now, when I first stumbled on the Church of Scientology, again, and we're going back to the early 90s, there we weren't Googling, so there wasn't that information right there at your fingertips. Probably heard about it, because certain celebrities were affiliated with it, whatnot. Bumped into one of their Boston people from the Boston office. Was actually flipping through index cards at Lowell District Court in Massachusetts. And this woman approached me and she just said, "Are you a private investigator?" I said, "Yes." And was just beginning, I was cutting my teeth as a
Right.
PI.
Right.
She said, "Would you like to come, do some work for the Church of Scientology?" I'm like, "Does it pay?"
I'm sure it pays better than most.
Right. It amazing.
Yeah.
It was a decent hourly rate back in the day. So we've spoken of this before, but this audience hasn't heard it. So she invited me to the Boston office. I go to the Boston office. I go through a series of interviews, which is fine. Everything seems on the up and up. They then give me the e-meter
That's right.
exam.
Yeah, you told me about
Yes. So, which is what they're auditing, right? Is that what they call it, or
the e-meter is
tell us
actually
about that?
So L. Ron Hubbard invented this. He's a science fiction writer. He was very well known already for his science fiction writing. And he came up with this idea that he was the first person who ever understood how the human mind actually works. And that there's two halves. You have this a fantastic analytical mind that works like a perfect computer, but it's held up because you've got this other side called the reactive mind.
Yes.
That stores all of these negative experiences. And what you need to do is dig out what's in there to get rid of it.
Right.
And how do you know you're digging out stuff that's genuine or not? Well, they have this device. It's called an e-meter. And people sometimes think it's like a polygraph, like a lie detector. Well, a polygraph has 4 inputs, right? Your pulse rate, your respiration rate, your blood pressure, and your skin galvanism, it's called.
Yes.
All right. Now, with all of those 4 things, all a polygraph operator can say is that, when I asked Mark this question, he reacted physically. Now, he can't say you were lying. He can't say that what he said at that point was not true.
Right.
He can only say he was reacting, which suggests maybe you were holding something back or lying.
Right.
That's why judges don't like it in court, because it's not exact
Yeah,
enough.
it's not admissible in the state of Massachusetts where I practice.
It's not exact enough. Okay, Scientology's e-meter is only one of those four. Just the skin galvanism.
Yes.
And even worse than that, the sensors are not like, okay, they're measured. So skin galvanism is a real thing. It's the amount of resistance and electrical resistance in your skin, and it does vary. But rather than like attach it as probes to your skin, you hold these cans.
Yes.
So now you
little cylinders.
You hold these cylinders. So now you're introducing even more variables.
Yeah.
How tightly are you gripping it? Are your hands dry or are they sweaty?
Right.
And Scientologists will tell you they know how to manipulate it. Of course. So it's just garbage as far as science is
what's
concerned.
that shit that they made me rub on my hands prior to
That's
holding
supposedly supposed to help with the connection.
Yes.
So anyway, the point is, if you know anything about electricity, if you know anything about you realize that this machine is absolutely useless.
Yeah.
It does not tell you anything. But Scientologists believe that this thing is literally reading your mind. And if you believe that, then this becomes the best lie detector in the world.
Right.
Because you believe I cannot hide anything from this machine. And so Scientologists just spill their guts.
Oh.
And so it's a fabulous interrogation machine.
Well, it wasn't so fabulous for me.
Well, you were probably skeptical, though.
Well, I mean, I have pretty good common sense, and I'm just like, and I had done a little bit of research. I probably looked in my parents' encyclopedias, and I'm like, I'm just going to go along with the game. Like these motherfuckers are going to pay me a shit ton of money, and I am just going to, play along. Right. Let's have fun. Now, I had just gotten back maybe 2 years earlier from Hollywood. I was out there in LA as a struggling actor, so I heard a little bit about him when I was out there. And I had some, some skills, some method acting and ad-libbing. But can you guess the type of questions they were asking me?
Very private ones about your personal life?
Yes, 100%. Now, there wasn't a lot in my personal life at 22 years old that I could reveal, but the ones that kind of stick out in my head, they want to know if I was undercover.
Yeah.
If I was sent there by the government.
FBI. Any connections to newspapers. Yeah.
Everything. Newspaper, reporter, government. Right. That seemed to be what they honed in on the most.
Right.
But I got it. That's probably the first test I ever got an A on in my life. I was actually proud.
That's great.
Can you give me a little sticker so I can bring home and show my family? I passed an e-meter Scientology test. So once that happened, I believe I flew out to Los Angeles and I met with their law firm.
They have a bunch.
There's a bunch. Moxon and Coburn.
Oh, Moxon and Coburn. You met? Okay.
Yeah. Of course. I mean, whatever. I signed a shit ton of papers, NDAs, you name it, whatever. And now, look, and I've spoken openly about this before. I take my job serious. I take confidentiality serious. I'm still an active investigator. I don't go out and spill tea on every case. If a client calls me and I do a job, it's private. This is a little bit different. I'm not talking about specific cases and specific names and things that I've dealt with over the years. I've been approached. You've asked me over the years. Maury Povich called me. Producers, Enquirers called me. All based on your story, by the way. Like, if you didn't freaking write about me, I wouldn't have been getting these calls. And I think I was pretty candid with you in that story where I'm like, okay, well, because do you remember me talking about the first job? So after I signed all these papers, I then became, I would say I was one of their lower level private investigators. Like there wasn't a lot, what they call it, the noisy investigations. There weren't a lot of noisy investigations at that time that I was doing, where I was disrupting people's lives, stalking, and things of that nature. It was more, the first job I ever did was, I think I was assigned to a a trash detail.
Yeah, I was going to ask, was it?
Yeah.
They call it the A line or something.
It
like
was a D line.
D line. They call
Yes,
it.
it was a
D-line.
D line.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I was assigned to my D line. I'm like, that's a really cool name, And my handler. God, I think her name was Meg. I think it just came to me. I don't know her last name, but she was really nice. And at the time, my twins were little, and she was really like interested in knowing my family,
Wow.
and I think she was trying to get a sense of what type of person that I was, because I kind of later learned in life that's a lot of their investigators were actually also members of the church. From one that I dealt with specifically was a Scientologist, and we can talk about him in a bit. He was from L.A., but they were very kind. But I was also the type of person where I wasn't going to get bullshitted. Just learned from a young age not to kind of go down those roads. But so she assigned me to a trash detail in an area of Boston that was called the Combat Zone. It's no longer there. It's in Chinatown in Boston. It was an accounting firm.
I was going to say, you probably can't say names, but
no,
I was going to say, was it lawyers or it was
can't
accountants?
say names. It was an accounting firm.
Wow.
And it was a dumpster.
Yeah.
And it was in an alley.
Oh, boy.
And I would have to go there, I don't know, maybe a Tuesday night for multiple weeks and pull this trash. And I think I said in the Village Voice interview that, it wasn't garbage trash. It was corporate trash.
Yeah.
It was paper.
Right.
So I thought I was the coolest private eye in the world. I had my 9mm and my mag light and my buck knife, and I would drive into the city and I would commit one crime that I would never do now, but I was committing a crime back then. You know what that crime was?
What?
Trespassing.
Okay.
I was popping open a dumpster.
Right, because if it's a trash can out on the sidewalk,
it's abandoned property.
It's abandoned. You can just do it, but
Yes.
when it's a dumpster with a cover,
when it's owned by a garbage company, now it is.
okay.
Now I'm trespassing.
Yeah, we talked about that.
Yeah, so I'd pop it open. I'd crawl inside. I'd spend an hour in there, an hour and a half sometimes, slicing through, getting what I needed, putting in a little envelope, and then meeting them the next day and handing it off to them. And I didn't.
Did I ever tell you about my own D-line experience?
No. Tell me.
I wrote about this in The Voice. One night I was down in Tribeca, having drinks with some colleagues, and I came out of this hotel, and I stumbled across this, just like what you're saying. Instead of, it wasn't garbage, but it was all like paper waste on the sidewalk, abandoned.
Right.
Who cares, right? Except I looked, and I realized the label showed whose paper recycling garbage it was.
Right.
Harvey Weinstein.
Really? Holy shit.
Now you understand, I'd had a few drinks.
Yeah.
So I just reached down, grabbed a bunch, got in the cab, and went home. So the next day I got up, I was like, what did I do last night? Oh my God.
Holy shit.
Scripts, contracts, phone lists. I mean, I had Woody Allen's cell number. I had Gwyneth Paltrow's cell number. I had these particular contracts of what actors and actresses wanted in their dressing room. I mean, incredible.
So you're a reporter. What are you doing with this?
I called them.
Was TMZ still around? Were they around yet?
I wrote about it. No, this was in like 2011 or 2012. Okay. And I wrote about it. And Harvey had me for lunch.
Really?
Yes, because you know why? He knew. Because I wrote about it. It was kind of silly and ridiculous.
Yeah.
He knew I had really personal stuff.
You had personal
about his, and
so this is prior,
way before he was.
So he's got
at that point. All I knew was he's a movie producer.
Right. He's got that guilty conscience.
This is way before he was prosecuted for anything.
Right.
And he had me to lunch, and I think he was just recognizing that and as a joke, at the end for my story, I mailed him a shredder.
Oh, that is funny. That's funny. Yeah, right. No shit. Shred that shit.
Incredible.
Did you barter for anything else, like a part in a movie or?
This was funny. So he and his friend that took me to lunch said, "So do you got any movies you want to make?" I'm like, oh, I should have worked up a pitch. No, but anyway, that was funny. But Patty Moyer told me a fun story. She did the D line for
Yeah.
Scientology, and she had a handler like you, and she said they were doing trash cans on the sidewalk, and they would go up, and they would see, okay, they've got a yellow
Mhm.
trash bag with an orange
Yep.
thing, and her handler would go back in the trunk of the car,
Mm.
and she had like 20 or 30 kinds of bags, match it
Yes.
and replace it,
Yes.
so that they didn't even know
Yes.
their trash was being taken.
Yeah, well, we would do that also. We would have to kind of do some advanced work,
Oh,
scout
incredible.
out what type of bags they had because you put the trash out the night before. You know what time your trash company typically comes. You're leaving for work. You got a can in your car or something, and you're like, you go to throw it in there, and there's nothing in there.
Yeah.
Who's taking my trash?
So you had to do that too?
Yeah. So we'd fill it up with like old newspaper.
Right.
And stuff it, make it look like it was trash, and replace it.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't done it in years, but I'm not opposed to pulling trash as an investigator as long as it's abandoned.
What was the best thing you got from the D line for Scientology? What particular document or
I don't know.
because you would turn it over and somebody else would evaluate whether it was good or not.
They would evaluate it. I was just a hitman. I would
Right.
just get it, meet him in a parking lot or an alley, and do the old
Yeah.
switcherooski and just give him the information. And
Yeah.
but for me, I was billing a shitload of money to do this. So so they started taking a liking to me. So I would say this is, and I didn't do anything wrong. So I went on Stern in 11. I believe I started doing work for them maybe in 90, 95, 90. I probably had a 7-8 year run with them.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's
Wow.
typical. They liked me. They would fly me to LA. I worked with a couple of different Scientologist people. Did a lot of surveillance in Pennsylvania. Can't really say why. I see your head's kind of spinning.
Yeah.
Did some surveillance in Pennsylvania. Most of my stuff was based around Massachusetts, but they started to really take a liking to me because I'm kind of an edgy guy. And they would fly me out to Los Angeles, and I'd work out there for a few
Did
weeks.
you ever work with a woman named Linda?
Doesn't ring a bell. I work with Jim.
Jim. I'm not sure who that would be.
Last name with an F. Kind of a bird. He was one of their main guys that I worked with. Good guy.
Okay.
Private investigator. I just thought he was an LA-based private investigator.
Okay.
I didn't realize that he was also a member. So when I first went out to the law firm, that's when I met with certain people, signed all my NDAs, everything. Of course they handed me a copy of Dianetics and
Did they?
and wanted me to read it. And I said, hey, look, I was, one step removed from the short bus in school. I'm not reading this trash. No pun intended. I might have used it to help fill up some of those trash bags.
Right.
But no, I had no interest. I did what they asked. I rode with people. I surveilled people. I did a few different disruptive investigations, basically going to functions or seminars for ex-members and doing a little Stuttering John act. You know what that means? You remember Stuttering John used to kind of disrupt people and ask stupid questions just to get people kind of riled up.
All right.
Under a fake name.
Yeah.
Did some of that stuff.
Wow.
But for the most part, they actually even gave me a tour of this. You ever been in the Celebrity Center?
Yeah, I had lunch with Corinne Powell there.
Did you?
Their spokeswoman, actually.
Did they give you a tour of the cleansing
25
area?
Years ago. No, they didn't give me. They were not happy that I was there.
They were not happy with
They had
that?
invited my editor to lunch. I was at that point. I was with a newspaper called New Times Los Angeles, and I had done a couple different stories. And they know that everybody's going to do a story about them.
Yeah.
They know that everybody from the New York Times and New Yorker, everybody's eventually going to do a story about them. They deal with that. But what really bothers them is when a publication keeps up on them. And we had written between another writer and I, we had done like 3 or 4 stories within a few months,
Right.
and they were getting very concerned. And so they invited my editor and publisher to lunch at the Celebrity Center. And at the last minute, the publisher couldn't go. The editor didn't want to go by himself, and he said, "Well, do you want to come?" I said, "Sure." They were not happy.
But it's that whole keep your enemies close, right?
Well, I mean, they were hoping to talk the editor out of doing anything else, so they were not happy that he brought me.
Right. So
But
you've made a living for the last how many years now? 30?
my first story about Scientology was a little more than 30 years ago. Yeah.
So you've made a living off of Scientology. You have the underground bunker. It's kind of a surveillance piece, right? It's kind of a watch
I just
party
you know
type thing.
I gave myself the job of daily beat reporter about Scientology. I cover Scientology the way some people cover Congress or the Dodgers.
Do you have ex members that are kind of field agents for you that
I'm very fortunate. I have a lot of folks who are readers of the bunker who are either ex-Scientologists or they've never been in Scientology. We're always on the lookout for things. I'm so fortunate. Every day they send me stuff, either forwarding Scientology's mail that they get still,
Mhm.
or flyers and that kind of thing on emails. And so I
Right.
have a lot of help.
Right.
That's the only way I could keep doing it.
I mean, I felt that back then, and maybe I'm wrong, that obviously they're a paranoid organization, and I think back then it was the beginning of blogs and posts, and there weren't even tweets back then, but just group chats or people saying something negative. So the majority of my investigations were just watching someone that may have said something detrimental for future potential litigation.
Right.
Just something for a rainy day.
Right.
This TV show said something about us or did a skit on us. Let's watch some people involved with that TV show. That type of stuff.
Right.
That
No, that's why it's great talking to you, because we assume that that's what they're doing.
Yes.
And even long times, what often happens is, like you said, they employed you for 7 or 8 years. I know
Yeah.
some other private investigators that worked for them for years and years,
Yeah.
and they're favored. They really rely on them, and then something happens.
Yeah, I don't know why they stopped. Like, I hadn't done any media. I hadn't done anything wrong. Maybe I turned down, I think if I remember correctly, they wanted me to be more involved on the road and travel more. And, being a father of twin boys that had muscular dystrophy and that required a lot of medical care, I made a choice to my family that I wasn't going to be one of those fathers, that was going to be away from his children. So
Right,
I think
right.
that was part of it. I think they kind of wanted to up my game because they were flying me out to LA. They were bringing me to certain events and, kind of showing me off a little bit. And maybe they thought they saw some naivete in me, but, prior to that, I'm a trained, I was a prison guard. I went through Corrections Academy. I understand human psychology and criminal psychology, and they're criminal. So let's talk a little bit about some of the things. Why don't you tell us some of the things that they're known for? I know they're for, draining people financially, human trafficking, making people become separated from their loved ones and their families.
Right.
Talk about, some of that stuff.
Well, once Hubbard decided that he had been the first one to figure out how the human mind worked, he developed this, parlor trick that he called auditing, and convinced people that they were, having these revelations about themselves. And he came up with this elaborate cosmology where you're actually this 76 trillion year old being called a thetan that has lived countless lives over and over and over again. And the problem you're having with life today is you've forgotten all that history. So that's what his auditing was about, this counseling he has you go through so you can start to remember who you were in past lives, thousands of years ago, millions of years ago, billions of years ago. And once you can piece that all together, you will recover these godlike abilities you once had and become what's called an operating thetan. Hubbard at one point said an operating thetan could destroy a planet between finger and thumb. Okay, this is the kind of, you really are a god, and you've just forgotten it. And if you can remember who you were, it would all come back. So they're chasing godhood is what's going on. And it's incredibly expensive. It gets more and more expensive as it goes. So there's a lot of pressure to keep going forward, to spend more and more money. And of course, they want you to close yourself off from anything that's not Scientology, including other family members. And that's how families get ripped apart. The pressure on the money is incredible. So they're really extorting people, especially old people. The pressure to donate is huge now, even more now than it was under Hubbard, under the new leader, David Miscavige. And then they've had some really strange. They have this inner hardcore called the Sea Org.
Yes.
These are people who have signed billion-year contracts, promising to come back lifetime after lifetime. They work around the clock, 365 days a year for about $50 a week. And not only do they have to be completely committed and cut themselves off from their families, but they are not allowed to have children. And so young women who get pregnant in Scientology are coerced into having abortions. And this has been documented. I mean, this, over many years, there's many examples of this. So it's a totalitarian organization that wants complete control of your life, wants you to cut off any outside influences. And the way they enforce it is through these really expensive interrogations with the e-meter. So if you happen to mention, and it's a snitching culture, it's, and I'm sure as a prison guard, a lot of this probably sounds really familiar to you. It's a snitching culture where, if you overhear that another Scientologist has said, I checked out that Leah Remini show. I was kind of curious. And, she says some damaging things. They'll immediately turn you in, and then you get hauled in for a weeks-long interrogation that can cost thousands of dollars. Yeah. So Scientologists learn very quickly, I got to keep my mouth shut. I got to not look at things that I'm not supposed to. They police themselves really, really well because they don't want to be put through those interrogations. So it's a very high-pressure, totalitarian organization. And, yeah, it rips apart families and destroys lives. And it's been abusive like this forever. And it's just really amazing that, we have as much information as we have now. Now it's ailing. Part of the thing that allowed it to operate like that, Mark, is that so much of it was secretive.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. How are they able to keep up with all this?
And with the 70s and 80s and 90s, people wanted to pay that money because what's at the end? What do you get to? What do you finally get? Well, now it's all out on the internet.
Yeah, it's
become much more difficult for them to sell it because when they come to you with the pitch is, oh no, we're just going to help you with your communication. It's kind of it comes off kind of like as a self-help business group. Mm-hmm. They're like a corporate kind of thing, but people have heard now. No, I think you're ultimately going to try to convince me I've got these space cooties and that I've got to spend $1 million in all this stuff, and so it's harder for them to convince people because the word is out. So now the numbers are the greatest extent of Scientology was around the year 1990. They had about 100,000 active members around the world. Mm-hmm. They've never had the millions that they claimed.
Right.
But they had about 100,000. So by the time you got involved, about 95, they were still probably pretty strong. Yeah. They had a lot of influence in Hollywood, a lot of people. But it has steadily declined over the years, and I think the number one reason is the internet.
The internet, everyone can read
all these secrets are out.
Right.
Alex Gibney's
and that's why they were hiring guys like me to try to
shut up the critics.
Try to shut up all the critics.
Right.
100%. I mean, so can you take away the 501c3 tax exempt status? Like, how did they get that to begin with?
It's really difficult. That was, I was very fortunate. I got to be in Alex Gibney's HBO movie Going Clear, and I get to explain that part of it along with Marty Rathman about that. What had happened was Hubbard initially started with this thing called Dianetics. It went through a rough year. He then regrouped and called it Scientology, and it was still not doing well. He was still really struggling. And so in 1953, he floated the idea of maybe we should call it a religion because they were starting to get in trouble because they were making health claims and various things like that. But he knew if they called themselves a religion, they wouldn't have to pay taxes and the government would back off. So he incorporated his first Church of Scientology in December 1953 in Camden, New Jersey. The actual first physical Church of Scientology opened in Los Angeles in February 1954. And then the founding Church of Scientology, even though it came later, was in 1955 in D.C. Okay, they just automatically didn't pay taxes. And initially they got tax exempt status, okay? But by 1967, the government had investigated and said, you know what? This thing's not operating like a church. It's operating like a business, and it's benefiting this one man, L. Ron Hubbard. It's called inurement. And so in 1967, the courts made the decision that no, this does not deserve tax-exempt status, and it lost tax-exempt status. But that doesn't mean Hubbard started paying taxes, right? So late through the rest of the 60s, 70s, 80s, as Marty Rathman explained in the movie Going Clear, by the late 80s, they had $1 billion tax bill, and they were only worth about a quarter of that. So if the government really enforced it, Scientology would go out of business, right? So they spent a lot of energy and money and resources to fight the IRS. They ran dirty tricks operations against the IRS. They filed thousands of lawsuits against individual
worked on any IRS cases. I can tell you that.
They sued individual IRS employees. Marty Rathman explained all this in Going Clear. I talked to a former IRS commissioner who confirmed all this for me. There's just no question that Scientology ultimately won its war. And the story is in October 1991, Miscavige and Marty Rathman, David Miscavige, who had taken over after L. Ron Hubbard's death, they were in D.C., and they said, let's just go down and see the IRS commissioner. And they went to the IRS building and said, can we see the commissioner? No, you can't, but if you come back later this week, we will give you an appointment. Okay. So later in the week, and this is the story Marty Rathman tells, they did get to meet with the IRS commissioner, who at that time, it was George H.W. Bush, who was the president, right? The first Bush. And they met with this guy, Fred Goldberg. And Marty said the key moment, because remember, it had been years they'd been fighting and suing and running dirty tricks. And at one point, when they were talking about maybe there's a way they could come to an agreement, Goldberg asked if we can come to an agreement with all this, will all this nonsense stop? And Miscavige said, of course. And Marty said, you could see Goldberg's shoulders do this. He slumped. And they realized they had him. He'd had enough. He didn't want to fight anymore. And so he made the decision. It took a couple more years. Yeah. They put them through a very complex process. But I talked to a tax journalist who was an expert in this, who told me once Goldberg made that decision and said, let's do an investigation, he said it was a done deal. Right. Yes, they made them jump through hoops and turn in all kinds of documents. But October 1993, now under Bill Clinton, but again, it started under Bush, finished under Clinton, October 1993, they reached the agreement, they signed it, and gave them everything, Mark. They gave Scientology even more than they were asking for. All the tax-exempt status. So they had to pay like a nominal $8 million bill out of the $1 billion that they owed.
Are they exempt from audit now? You think that
Oh no, they can't. I know that, for example, they've been buying a lot of buildings, and it's been suggested, well, they need to do that to keep up their tax-exempt status. The IRS isn't looking at them.
Right.
It's over. It's done. They don't pay anything. And but as Lawrence Wright explained in Going Clear, this is the important thing. It's not just the money, because he can always get more donations. It's that this tax-exempt status gives them protection. Sure. So that when an ex-Scientologist sues over being forced to have an abortion, which happened at one point, or the all these things, extortion, the first thing Scientology does when they go into court and said, we're broke. We're church.
We're church. Can't squeeze blood from a stone.
You can't sue us for this.
Can't do this.
So it's just a huge protection for them, and it would take so much energy on behalf of the IRS to reopen this thing, and I just don't think anybody down there has that kind of. Mike Rinder once explained it to me.
They don't want that fight. Yeah, Mike Rinder. God bless his soul. I know he's gone.
So sad he died last year, but he told me this. He said, "You know what, Tony? There's these middle managers at the Department of Justice and the IRS who really make the decisions, right? You have to imagine you're this middle manager at the Department of Justice or the IRS." And you're thinking about, maybe we should reopen that investigation and see if Scientology's in violation. He says, you have to make the calculation. If you do this, that's going to be the rest of your career.
Right.
The rest of your career and beyond.
It's going to define you.
It's going to be fighting the Church of Scientology. They're going to investigate your ass.
Yeah.
And who wants to do that?
Who wants them up your ass? Do you think, now I'm a pretty observant guy. I don't talk a lot about Scientology. I keep it kind of smart. You think they've watched me since I've left?
Oh, I'm sure they have.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You think they've been staking me out a little
Are you
bit?
kidding me? When you did that Stern interview,
You think they were watching me after
I'm sure
Stern?
they keep
I
an
was
eye on
looking
you.
over my shoulder. I mean, I, I'm pretty smart with my trash, but yeah, I always thought about that because that got a lot of traction.
Yeah.
Because I was probably one of the first guys.
Oh no, you're the only one that I can think of.
Right.
That's what I was going to say before. Is
Yeah.
that there are other private investigators
Yeah.
that have been in favor for many years, and then
Yeah.
something happens,
Yeah.
and suddenly they're out of favor, but they don't come out and talk about it.
Right.
And the only one of the ones besides you were these two former cops. They weren't PIs, but they were former cops who were hired to follow one man,
Yeah.
Pat Broker, for 20 years.
Oh, I read about that.
Right.
Yeah.
And they did
What
their,
a gig.
oh, and they were making $500,000 a year.
Yeah, I read. I wonder how many different vehicles they had.
And the amazing stories that they told, but then they got screwed over from their perspective, lost their jobs, and so they sued.
Yeah.
And so then they gave interviews. They talked to me, they talked to
Yeah.
the Tampa Bay Times,
Yeah.
and then the church told them, "Shut up,
Right.
we'll pay you," and you'll never hear from those guys ever
Right.
again.
Well,
You're the only one that has come out and
Yeah.
spoken and keeps speaking.
and I haven't given much information, no, will I? But yeah, it was a wild point in my life. I know I did have communication with Rinder and Remini back in the day, a few years ago when they were doing the show
Yeah.
about, possibly making an appearance, but nothing, ever transpired. Now, here's a question. It's a trick. It's not a trick question, but is there anything the Church of Scientology has done good? They done any good in their existence?
Oh gosh, that's a good question. I guess pissing off Leah Remini was pretty good because we got some great TV out of it.
Right.
She's
Right.
amazing.
She is amazing. Yeah, she's so nothing. I mean, do you think that? So
look,
when I was working for him, I always convinced myself that there's such a thing as religious freedom, and I was looking at them like they were religion. Before, I mean, I wasn't drinking the Kool-Aid because I never would drink the Kool-Aid. Although one day I was sick, and they handed me a little cup of oil they wanted me to drink, and I said,
it's called CalMag, I think is what they probably
yeah,
gave you.
I'm like, I'm all set with that shit. But do you think they take bad people off the street and keep them from hurting others?
They have this line that L. Ron Hubbard believed that everybody, the big difference between, Christianity, for example, Christianity has this basic idea that we're all sinners and we're trying to save ourselves. Whereas L. Ron Hubbard's idea was everyone's basically good.
Right.
See, what a wonderful philosophy that is. But it's completely contradicted by everything he said about people, which is that what L. Ron Hubbard's real message was that you're a 76 trillion old being that has committed every heinous crime in the galaxy at one point or another. The reason why you shouldn't turn in a child molester is that somewhere in your 76 trillion years, you were a child molester. That's literally the Scientology philosophy. So this idea that he thinks everyone's good, completely contradicted by what he said. So I think, they will say, well, they train people to be good communicators. That's good, Tony. That they have these moral precepts. But again, everything they claim to do positive is contradicted by their actions and what they do to people. So I think it's all based on such a lie as far as what they will not tell you what they're really, if that's my number one thing. If they came to you up front and said, we think you're this nearly immortal being that needs to regain your sense of yourself by learning who you were millions of years ago on other planets, and it's going to cost you $1 million, but it's an incredible experience. Okay, that's fine, but they won't tell you about any of that until you're hundreds of thousands of dollars in. It's complete bait and switch.
Yeah, right. Do you feel that? Now, I've come in contact with a few of their celebrities. I bumped into Tom Cruise at the Celebrity Center. He was there for some continuing education. Certainly seemed pleasant enough. He talked to me for a bit.
Oh.
I did. So another thing I used to do for them,
Yeah.
totally legit, and something I enjoyed doing, was when a celebrity would make an appearance, I would kind of be in the shadows. I would have a list of people that, to watch out for and make sure that they weren't going to disrupt.
Wow.
So I remember specifically doing stuff for Travolta, spending some time with John during Battlefield Earth when he was in Boston. Some of that. So to me, that was like, okay, that that's within the umbrella of what a private investigator would do under my PI security
Sure.
license. Make
Sure.
sure someone's not going to go up and
Executive protection, they call it,
yeah,
right?
executive protection. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, 100%. Do you feel like some of these celebrities that are still linked to them that they just have dirt on them that they can't leave?
A lot of people think that Tom Cruise probably would love to leave, but they've got this big file on him. No, I know it's hard for people to believe this, understand this. Tom Cruise and John Travolta really believe that L. Ron Hubbard was the greatest human being who ever lived, and that Scientology is the only thing that's going to save this prison planet. They can't understand why you haven't joined yet. See, I know it's really hard for people to wrap their heads around that these are true believers, but they really are. It's incredible.
I mean, having recently just lost my son Troy, I've been doing a lot of soul searching, and I was raised Catholic. I went back to the Catholic Church just to kind of test it out again, and it just wasn't a fit for me. And as a dad that loses a child, or just anyone that loses a loved one, you want to believe that your family member is in a better place than down here in this messy world we live in.
Right.
Not once did I think of picking up Dianetics and joining Scientology. I mean, if they came to me and they said, "Mark, you will be connected with your child, and you have to."
Well,
join.
here's what's even stranger, because you talk about family bonds and how close you were to your son. Scientology's belief is that you are this thetan that goes from lifetime to lifetime. So it's just when this body wears out, that's the end of this lifetime, and you are a thetan, this spirit. And so they believe that you literally then, there's this in-between time when you go to Venus or Mars, but then you ultimately go to a maternity ward and jump into a new baby, start the new lifetime. Well, that means that if you have jumped into an infant, that you as a thetan have no real connection to that infant's biological parents. The family is a fiction in Scientology. You see? And so, this may be your child in this lifetime.
So they wouldn't want me.
Well, it's so strange, and I think this is how parents are able to drop off their 9-year-old to the cadet org and just abandon them in Scientology. Is they think, well, that's just another thetan.
Right.
They'll figure it out. They don't see it the way that you just described it, which is that you form this bond with this other person and you want to know what's happened to them. So now on the other end, that's the start of the lifetime, is that you're just joined this family. There's no real tie. On the other end, I will say, if there's one thing I have to give Scientology, is that when someone passes away, they try not to be sad about it, because, well, they're just going to get another body and come back to us, and we're going to see them again. So
that's not a bad way to look at things.
It's not a terrible way to look at things. No. Exactly.
I was doing some research on the Church of Scientology, just looking for some updated information. And one thing that maybe they were somewhat innovators with, given how we live nowadays, is the whole cleansing aspect. Now, I'm a gentleman that I have a sauna at my house and a hot tub, and I like to cleanse my body, and I like to take vitamins, and I like to be healthy. Now, I don't like to sit in a sauna for weeks like they make.
Right.
But were they ahead of their time when it came to, I know they were cleansing for different reasons, but
they were definitely ahead of the curve as far as detoxing is concerned.
Yes.
But it's it's so unscientific. It's just this quack thing that they've got. Where what people often don't understand is that what Hubbard is saying when he's having you sit in a sauna for 6 or 7 hours a day for a month straight,
that's crazy.
With you're having bigger and bigger ingestion of the vitamins until insane amounts.
Drinking that vitamin,
huge, the CalMag thing, or I don't know what it is.
B12, magnesium, a bunch of
just
shit.
Huge amounts of vitamins and stuff. And then, but he's talking about it cleanses the thetan. It's not, yeah, you're cleansing these tissues and stuff,
It's not going to
but
help
it's
maybe prevent cancer.
no, I mean it's dangerous. It's really dangerous, especially for people who have a compromised liver and that kind of thing.
How many people have?
I mean, I know of a couple people whose deaths seem to be attached to it, but it's just really, especially in Narcanon, but it's just, it's a quack science fiction writer's idea of how to clean toxins out of the body. I think it's really dangerous.
Interesting. I actually, actually was giving a tour of the cleansing facility when I was out in Los Angeles,
Okay.
and I believe Tom Cruise came through his own personal secret bat cave entrance,
Nice.
if I remember correctly. But he is still a wonderful actor. Is he detached from his child with like Katie Holmes, or
Yeah, as far as I know, he just walked away from Surrey, and Surrey's now in college and very close with her mom. As far as I know, there's no relationship with her dad. He does have the two kids that he and Nicole adopted,
Yeah.
Isabella and Connor, but he walked away from Surrey. And people ask me about that. Is it because Katie was declared a suppressive person? Katie did this surgical operation to ditch him in 2012 when he was in Iceland filming a movie, right?
yeah?
And it generated this huge negative press about Tom. That alone would probably get most anybody declared, but we never heard anything official as far as. But so if Katie was declared a suppressive person, that would make Surrey PTS,
Right.
because she's one step away. And so, yeah, if Tom was some average Scientologist, he would be asked to disconnect from Katie and Surrey. However, he's a celebrity, and he's not only a celebrity, he's the number one celebrity. Celebrities get to break all those rules, Mark.
Yeah.
So this is so important. If Tom Cruise wanted to see Katie hang out with Surrey,
He could.
David Miscavige would never stay in his
Right.
way. There's no way. Tom Cruise could do that. And so Tom Cruise choosing the Church of Scientology over his own daughter is his decision. And this is why I think he should really be asked about it, but no reporter ever will.
No one will. Is he the heir apparent?
No, because like I said earlier, that they are following L. Ron Hubbard's rules. And L. Ron Hubbard's rules are that the person who runs Scientology has to be the captain of the Sea Org.
Right.
And in order to be a member of the Sea Org, you have to sign that
You
billion-year
gotta
contract,
live by their
make
rules.
$50 a week, right? And so if David Miscavige is out of the picture, the next person to take his place would come from the Sea Org, not Tom
I
Cruise.
just figured maybe they could make an
I
exception.
mean, they're good friends, and I think
Yeah.
that Tom Cruise cares about what's going on in the church, and I think Dave runs things by him. But I don't think Tom Cruise would be the person who would become the next chairman of the board.
That's interesting. So what? Obviously, Dave Miscavige, his wife, has been MIA for
20 years,
yeah
20 years last summer,
two
and
decades now. Like they say, she could be in hiding. What's your take on that?
no, I think there's very good evidence that they keep her at this one particular little compound near Lake Arrowhead, up in the San Gabriel Mountains, east of Los Angeles.
And why are they keeping her there? Because
San Bernardino Mountains. I'm sorry.
Why are they keeping her there? Is she? Are they keeping her there under lock and key?
Well, there's the most secretive subsidiary in a secretive church is called the Church of Spiritual Technology, CST. It has a very bizarre mandate. It's L. Ron Hubbard created it in 1981, 80 or 81, when he reorganized the church. Its job is to store L. Ron Hubbard's words and lectures to last thousands of years in case of civilization collapse.
Mm-hmm.
And so CST operates these underground vaults. There's 3 of them in California, 1 in New Mexico. They tried to build one in Wyoming and gave up on it. And then they have a couple of other places as well. But they have the one near Lake Arrowhead. It's called Twin near a little hamlet called Twin Peaks. So we usually call it Twin Peaks. It's it's a compound. I think it's like 50 acres in the beautiful wooded setting. There's probably 15 people who live there permanently, and they work on that archive project, archiving Hubbard's. They even did an episode of it on Scientology TV, showing you these clean rooms where they're making these laser discs and stuff, and these books to last thousands of years, put in these titanium boxes on this underground vault. and I believe she's been there that whole 20 years in that little crew working on that work. Just Dave doesn't want to see her. Dave doesn't want her anywhere around him, but he can't let her out.
Right.
And I do believe it's a prison, and they just will not ever let her out.
They just won't let her out.
Yeah.
Jesus Crow.
That's Shelley Miscavige. I don't know if we said her name. That's Shelley Miscavige.
Shelley Miscavige. Are you interested in other different religious organizations or cults as they're labeled, other than Scientology?
Occasionally I do some other stories. Earlier this year, I was approached by a woman who had an incredible story. She lives in Maine now, but when she was a child, she grew up in a very religious family that was very into prophecies and all that. And they went to Korea for a while and got into this bizarre organization called itself Hallelujah Prayer Center, where there was this woman running it who would call people up on stage that had ailments, various, she was supposedly a healer, and she would proceed to literally dig into people's bodies, like rip open people, and they would not only make videos of her ripping people open and pulling tissue out, but they made videos of it and sold it in the gift shop. And this was in the 90s, right?
Wow.
And so this woman in Maine, she actually had one of these videos and showed it to me. I could not believe it. And to this day, Hallelujah Prayer Center is still an ongoing thing, and they actually have a center in Los Angeles. And I tried to get this woman on the phone, this woman that used to do those surgeries. She called them Holy Spirit surgeries. So I was just, that was a fascinating story.
That's probably where Andy Kaufman went. So I live in the Plymouth, Mass area, Mayflower, The Rock, that boring shit.
Yeah.
And in the center of town, there's a general store that's owned by the 12 Slaves.
I don't know that group.
Yeah, it's another religious cult-like organization, and there's just a lot of speculation about them. Look them up; they're pretty interesting.
I will check that out.
I've had a little, I guess, contact with Christian Brethren. Another one you can look up.
Look, life is very complicated. We're all struggling, and
people just looking for
people are looking for something to belong to.
Yeah.
And what I find.
Yeah. Go to jiu-jitsu. That's what I do.
One of the things that they, what does Scientology sell? What's the appeal?
Yeah.
I always explain this way is, you and I know life is messy. Life is unpredictable. You just had a tragedy you're dealing with. We all have these difficult things. Wouldn't it be nice if there were just known answers? And that's what they claim to have is the certainty. They sell certainty. Oh, yeah, we have all the answers. Yeah. Well, just coming in. Well, now you and I know they don't. Right. But there are a small number, a percentage of people who are taken in by that and said, you know what, these Scientology people, they seem to have all the answers. Now, you and I wouldn't think that. And that's why I think only a small percentage of people have ever been interested in it. Yeah. But there are people that's like so comforting to them to know I can belong to a group, they care about me, and they have all the answers.
Right. But until they start draining your bank account. And that's when it starts to get a little bit shady, and the red flag should go up. And again, I agree 100%. There's certain people out there that just need a pack.
Yeah,
they need someone to roll with. They need someone to make them feel better. I have my pack. I go to jiu-jitsu, and I only spend $150 a month for a membership. And I see my children.
Yeah.
So so it's a healthy pack, but. Maybe it boils down to the biggest issue we have here in America is mental health.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, maybe they seek out and they prey on people that
they definitely prey on the vulnerable. Absolutely.
On the vulnerable, on the weak. And it's very interesting. It's been, made a lot of great conversation for me. My wife loves, we go out. My wife's kind of quiet. She's a nurse and she's amazing. And if we go out with another couple, that she doesn't know, maybe a friend of mine and his wife, and she's kind of shy, she knows I'm going to keep the conversation going. Especially if I start talking Scientology or whatever the case may be. But I don't think they'd ever have me back as as an investigator, but I probably wouldn't go back at this point because that person that I had mentioned that was kind of my LA handler. I know that he was involved with a lot of stuff with Render. And that's only based on me just years later just doing some YouTube searches. I believe there's some videos out there, and I said, "Oh, holy shit!" And I can honestly say I never did that. And if I ever was asked to harass, stalk, upset people, sit outside the, sitting outside someone's house as a private investigator, waiting for someone to leave, is what private investigators do.
Right.
But I would never have gone up to someone on the street. They're walking their kid to school and just start badgering them
Yeah.
because I was raised the right way.
Right. Right.
So I'm glad that I never did that, or was never. I wasn't even. Maybe they sensed that from me, and maybe that was one of the reasons why, you know, that I know they wanted me to get more involved from a travel standpoint, but maybe that's another reason why. Maybe there were some things I said that they were testing me on.
Well, I'm glad they used you to the extent that they did, though, so that you can tell us about it, because it really
Yeah.
confirms a lot of what I think we've always
Well,
assumed.
I want to thank you for coming on. You've always been very kind and generous. Let's talk. Let's mention the Underground Bunker. Max, my producer son, will put that up there so people can check it out.
Right. So the Underground Bunker, it's tonyortega.substack.com. I'm on Substack now. That's where I am. I wrote a book about Paulette Cooper, who was a journalist who was maybe the target of the fiercest retaliation of all time. And I'm in the movie Going Clear, Alex Gibney's HBO film. If you haven't seen that, it's really good.
It's a great film, and I almost believe someone reached out to me after you wrote a story on me about that movie being interviewed, and I feel like I said no for whatever reasons, but I wouldn't have had much to offer, I don't think, to that movie, but it certainly would have been fun to do. Well, you're an interesting guy. I want you to kind of keep up the good work policing them. If you need me to do some counter surveillance on you, I'd be more than happy to. I have people call me all the time
Oh, wow.
that say, "I know I'm being followed. Can you follow me to see if I'm being
Wow.
followed?"
Okay, yeah.
And typically, I can very easily screen them when they call me and know that it's related to some sort of paranoia or mental health, and I'll turn down those jobs. But if you ever need me to
Okay.
sit outside your office, whatever you need, like I'll give you the Mark
All right,
Chauppetta
man.
discount.
Thank you, man.
All right. On that note, thanks for coming on the show.
My pleasure, man.